So first basic question to get us started. What's your community's mission and who does it serve?
Yeah, so Startup Colorado is a 501c3 nonprofit that supports rural entrepreneurs, enabling them to build businesses in the places they call home, whether that's in the mountains or the Eastern Plains. And we do that through our online Hivebrite community, which serves both entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders through storytelling initiatives and select financial awards. When we first started out, one of the biggest challenges in rural ecosystem building was the connectivity of resources, everything from business education to networking opportunity to funding sources. Colorado has amazing geography. There's the Rocky Mountains, the Great Plains, the desert canyons, but that geography also makes connectivity between towns and regions really difficult. So when we launched our Hivebrite community in 2020, it was a way to create a density of resources for rural entrepreneurs across these huge regions. Entrepreneurship can be a very lonely endeavor, even in the city, but in rural communities, that isolation can be intimidating. So we wanted to give visibility to rural entrepreneurs so that they could find each other and dispel that isolation and help them find inspiration. So in the last 2.5 years since we launched our network, we've grown to 1,200 plus members working across industries and regions. And in terms of impact, we're now able to start tracking entrepreneur success stories that are a result of their involvement with our community. And yeah, so we're really looking forward to 2023 because we have some new initiatives in place to further those connections and help them start new businesses.
So it sounds like you've done some, from the beginning over the past 2 years, you've done quite a bit of evolving and sort of lessons learned along the way and as you grow your community. So in thinking about that, can you explain to me what a member-centric community is and why it's so important to you?
Yes, absolutely. So as the community engagement manager, I am always trying to build authenticity and trust into our online platform. What makes us different from the other, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the other platforms is that this is a community that's there to engage. It's not just about being a voyeur. And a way we set this up very intentionally from the beginning is by creating some customized data as they come into our platform. And so when they sign up and activate, we are asking them to identify who they are, which is helpful to do all those connections that we've already mentioned. But we're also asking them, what are they here to give? As in, like, what is their expertise? Are you a really great coach, a mentor? Do you have marketing expertise, funding expertise, accounting, et cetera? And then what are you here to look for? What are you here to get? And to really set it up from the beginning to be able to ask for something. I really need help in coaching and mentorship. And then that's data that's very valuable for us to, on the back end, see, oh, I know I can connect these two people already. And so another place that this is really visible is our events calendar on the screen. Only one of these events is ours. It's that bright lean coffee on the right. And the rest are events from our business support organization partners. They were at the forefront of how we set up this platform. And so it was important for us to make sure that they had a wider reach for their events that are so valuable, as we are the only ones putting all of this in one place. Before this calendar, you'd have to just go find this information in each little website. So by creating this platform and the community behind it, we are now seeing it all in one place. And it's exciting to see that entrepreneurs are taking advantage of this because we have entrepreneurs on our network who are service entrepreneurs offering business services to other entrepreneurs, and they can set up workshops to introduce them to what they do, virtual co-working. And it was really rewarding for me last week when a community partner came up and said that no one would have been at her workshops had it not been for our platform. So the density is coming with that.
So it sounds like you really know your audience, and who this community is for, who you're engaging, by really understanding sort of what they're getting, what they're giving. So it really does feel community based, as opposed to, I just come here to find this, I don't know, this resource, but really sort of community based engagement. So in terms of your research to do this, and I assume that maybe these sort of research techniques kind of evolve as you go along, but what research did you undertake to ensure that your community is member-centric and that it's really about them in particular and not just function based?
Yeah. Launching any type of new initiative or product in a rural community is inherently risky. Many of these communities have been burned in the past by outside organizations coming in and essentially overpromising and under-delivering. So, they've seen a lot of big ideas come and go. And we knew that whenever we chose to launch a online community in rural areas, we basically had one shot to get it right. They weren't going to give us another chance if it was a bust. So we had to do a lot of research very early on. We hired an intern and she conducted many surveys with rural entrepreneurs and helped us put together a steering committee comprised of rural entrepreneurs as well as different ecosystem builders throughout rural Colorado. And the first goal was to assess, do you even need an online community? We didn't want to make the assumption that this was something that they wanted and needed. There were plenty of people who were telling us like, oh, just use a Facebook group. And we knew that was wrong, but we wanted to hear from other people, from the audience that we were looking to serve, that was not the correct direction for us. So we had our steering committee and we did several rounds of surveys with them, both learning what their greatest challenges were. What do rural entrepreneurs need in an online community? And what we learned was that they needed a place with easy access to business resources and funding opportunities. That's kind of what Vanessa was getting at earlier with the events, is that there just wasn't a single place where you could go to look for business resources, particularly for Colorado's entrepreneurs. There was also a demand for peer-to-peer networking, as well as somewhere where they could go in and ask questions about their business, get feedback from experts, and potentially meet mentors. And then, a consistent place to find and post events. That was one of the biggest things that kept coming up in our research. So that early research helped us define the different modules that we eventually built out in that initial launch. And it also informed our early engagement strategies, which was basically teaching people how to use and engage in the network, because it wasn't automatic. People didn't just join it and know what to do as soon as they got in there. There was a lot of kind of hand holding along the way and telling people like, hey, will you post this in the live feed? And oh, this would be a better place for you to ask this question. Another example of us trying to understand who our audience was understanding the difference in rural communities, because they're not all the same. They have very different spirits, and when it comes to the adoption of new tech platforms, very different mindsets. So there were a lot of towns on mostly on the western slope that were ready for it. Like, they knew what to do, they got in there right away, and they started using it. But then there were other communities that were, Facebook was their pretty much only social network that they used. And so we had to approach them a little bit differently in how we, brought them into the network as new members, but then also how we taught them to use it. And it's been really interesting seeing the ways in which different communities and different types of entrepreneurs are getting in there and using it. Some people need to have a lot of instruction, and other people are like on it, they're ready to go.
So have you had, in terms of your approach then, have you taken sort of, you have both sort of where you can simply, for instance, send an invitation. I mean, literally just send kind of some sort of invitation, email communication, but then have also taken the approach where you need to be more sort of hands-on, where you're having maybe live sessions where you're literally holding their hand along the way to make them comfortable in the process.
Yeah, and it's especially early on. I'll let Vanessa will be able to talk about the literal hand holding, but early on, we started out by doing just kind of mass invitations and just seeing who joined. And then once we started to see the gaps in who was joining and who wasn't, that's where we started targeting our approach to recruiting new members. But I'll let Vanessa talk about the value of kind of face-to-face and the more personal touch.
Yes, I do that. I do a lot of hand holding, but it's the best kind. I get to frequently I'm greeting new members in our network every month by reaching out saying, hey, have a one-to-one with me so I can show you how to utilize this this platform to your advantage. Once I get them into that one-to-one setting, I connect with them personally, and I give them permission to use this tool, and I show them how to target a post so that they're reaching specific members based on that customized profile data. And once they're empowered that way, it works. And I send a little nudge and they do it. And maybe the next time they don't need a nudge. And that's the most exciting part, is once I see, oh, they've got the hang of it now. But it is teaching. The one-to-one approach works really well. And I don't think there's an entire replacement for it, but we do also have one-to-many approaches that I've been testing out with different styles of events.
It sounds like it also helps him. I know that a value for you is authenticity, that everyone be authentic, that it be a safe space. So it sounds like it also encourages that as well.
Yes, definitely.
And I think seeing the energy and the momentum taking place in the live feed trains people as well, and it encourages them to participate in a similar manner. So once you have one person taking a risk and asking a question, you start getting more people doing the same.
Yeah, I promise them, like I am a face promising them, if you are brave enough to ask this question in the live feed or in your group, like I will make sure you get an answer. Like it might not be right away, like you can get a right away answer on Facebook, but it will be within, 24, 48 hours.
That's excellent. So could you tell us also other ways that you're putting your members at the center of your community?
Yes, I would love to. And Kat will be sharing a slide shortly. So as we see members come in and see how they're identifying, and I get to talk to them about what kind of support they want or what's missing from their community. That's when we launch specific groups. Part of my onboarding was I launched this group for rural women in entrepreneurship. And I started testing a format of a lean coffee, which is a virtual 1 hour on Zoom, where everyone coming into the meeting gives a question or a topic that is really relevant to them at this time. And then we gather and we vote on the topics. So, we've got 20 women on the call and 20 topics. So we can't talk about them all. We vote on them and see where the most popular topic is. That's where we start. And I time the discussion. And then the whole time we're sharing resources in the chat and going into tangents. The timing helps a lot for that, but it feels like group therapy in a way, which is it's really nice for that isolation that Margaret mentioned. I've seen women connecting from all corners of the state and then meeting in real life, which is really exciting to have gone with it this far, that I'm seeing a lot of real life connections based on these random connections that you just don't know who's going to be in a lean coffee. It's always a different group of entrepreneurs and business support agents. And then we have this dedicated online space on our platform for them where they are sharing opportunities. You can see one there from Heather, who's testing out a workshop and wants more feedback. And so the network itself is set up to be a safe space, and I'm always encouraging entrepreneurs to ask for help. And then we're able to even create these more safe spaces based on your region, or, you know, whether or not you're in a specific industry or with a topic specific area like women in entrepreneurship. We've also done some other style of events. I've done a speed networking event that is a non-Zoom format. And it's super fun to have a time discussion, because unlike in real life networking, you know that you only have so much time with someone. And so it does, it's a different pace, and it's exciting to do something that's not on Zoom. They have a lot of fun with it, and it's been creating some great connections. And I do travel around the state to attend other events within our ecosystem, the events that are on that events calendar. I'm going to as many of those as I can to talk about the network, what it's about, you know, mention Lean Coffee, and mention, you know, anything that they might benefit from. And that creates a much, like, every time I show up in person, we get a spike of new members, because they've seen it from someone, and it's a real person saying, you can trust this part of the internet. The internet's becoming a scary place, and that's something we're solving for. And then we are, I'll let Margaret talk about how we launched the platform, because there was a really cool event we did with that.
Yeah, so we launched the platform, and it was still kind of quasi quarantine. It was in November of 2020, and we couldn't bring people together in person. So we wanted to introduce everyone to our new online community in a really fun and engaging sort of way. And I think by November of 2020, we were all just kind of burnt out, being out on computer screens. So we put together this party called Farm to Spaceship, and it was celebrating just the diversity of businesses in rural Colorado. And we hired a kind of an interactive events coordinator to put together a kind of a show for people. So we mailed all of the invitees mocktail ingredients, so that they could sit in front of their computer and create a mocktail, and it was specially crafted just for us for our event. And then there were games and a little pamphlet that they got, and throughout the course of the event they were forced to interact with one another. They couldn't just sit back and drink their fake drink. And and yeah, so the whole idea of that was bringing people together in an online space to show them what was possible with this new platform, because we didn't want it to be the same as everything else on the internet. And we had people emailing us afterwards saying that was the best event that they attended in 2020, which I'm not sure where the bar is for events in 2020, but we still took it as a compliment.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, because I listened to an interview with a community manager who talked about something similar. Actually, it was for employees, and they sent out sort of it was during the pandemic, so they had to do it online. So they sent out sort of a box of confetti, and I think that maybe they had some sort of drink in there and some snacks, and the idea of coming together but online, but sharing, like physically sharing something that was kind of a shared experience that was happening at the same time, and to make it more festive. So I love that idea of taking both the virtual and physical and kind of bringing them together to create this kind of special experience. There's a question I have that I actually get all the time from the various communities I work with, and that is, do we need a full-time community manager? I tend to think yes, because I see that you're able to better connect, as Vanessa, as you've talked about, going around and literally meeting the people who are in your community, although the community may meet online, also having this sort of physical element to it. So what would be your response to that?
Well, we hired one.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think you would have had the same kind of success without?
No, and we were seeing the tension there and just the lack of momentum. So whenever we first launched it, it was it was kind of being managed by our whole team. There was the expectation that we're all going to get in there every day and do a little bit of something, but there still just wasn't that focused energy, someone that is in there all the time and making the effort to watch every post that's occurring in the live feed and make those individual connections and teach people how to use it. You know, it's a level of just community engagement that I don't think you can get unless you have somebody that's purely focused on it, because people don't just join the network and start interacting automatically. You know, eventually that will start happening. We're starting to see it now, but we needed to have, you know, Vanessa in there really, really teaching people and making them feel welcome and showing them the value that can be withdrawn from this space.
Yeah, we're expecting them to not use it like Facebook. And so if someone comes in there and just like, you know, has the bravery to post on their own, it sometimes can come off a bit salesy or impersonal.
Yep.
And then I reach out to them and I encourage them, like, introduce yourself, like really tell us who you are on a personal level, and then tell us about what you're here to get or give for your business or organization, because especially with our ecosystem, the players are going to move around. So if you joined our network as an entrepreneur and then you become a funder or, you know, like those, that should be relationship first, not organization first.
So in terms of, so it sounds like there's a bit both for you're encouraging them to sort of tell their story, right? As well as you're telling the story about your community, which is also an important element when building a community, is being able to tell the story both of your community to those that are coming in, as well as to usually internal stakeholders who also need to understand how the community is evolving, the successes, and basically making the case for why it's important to have this community and how it aligns and helps to meet the overall organizational goals. So can you tell me what makes a great story and how you can make sure your stories resonate with your audiences, especially because you often have multiple audiences that you need to tell this story to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we all know that stories are important, but I do want to just say what is a story, because we don't always ask ourselves. And at its most basic, it is about a person or a character who has a goal. And then there's all these obstacles that stand in the way between them and their end destination. And in entrepreneurship, there is no shortage of obstacles and different challenges that they have to overcome. So we have a lot of material to work with. And for us, it's in terms of the stories that we're putting out into the world, it's about finding a story that is really unique and interesting, but then making it relatable to other entrepreneurs so that they can see themselves in that story and see that, oh, I'm not alone, and this person's doing it in this town, so I can do it in my town. So storytelling is 25% of our mission at Startup Colorado, and we achieve this in several different ways. So there's the entrepreneur news site, which you can see here, and we actually work with freelance writers that I go out and assign stories to about rural entrepreneurs, and then we do a little bit of informative type pieces, but the ones that have the most success in terms of readership and engagement are just feature stories about entrepreneurs, like this one about how beating cancer and finding new love inspired this fly fishing entrepreneur. That's been a really successful one for us because it was really inspiring. It was a cute story, and he's building an incredible business. So we have our entrepreneur news site, and then we also have the podcast series, which is also narrative. So it's kind of, if you think about a radio story where they're going to a place and telling a story about someone. So there's that component of the work, but then we're also doing kind of little mini storytelling initiatives, within the live feed. Vanessa I'm not going to spoil what you're going to say in a little bit, but there are different types of posts where we're seeing somebody achieve success, like they're either making a new connection or finding a new business partner or finding the resource that they needed. And then we're taking that interaction and turning it into a story for external audiences. So on our social channels and different mailing lists, and saying, here is an entrepreneur that asked a question in our network, and here's the result. And so we're taking that tiny little story and communicating it to a broader audience to show the value of being a part of this network. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah. And I love that I see here that you had that you had the art of gathering, which I think is a great reference for any community. Actually, I think even in terms of when you were talking about lean coffees and that sort of thing, it's also, she talks about creating traditions that resonate with a community to help to bind a community. And it sounds like with what you've been doing, you've been trying to create that sense of community through creating these sort of different initiatives and kind of creating these traditions, I guess you could say, within your community, which also helps to speak to authenticity, helps to encourage people to tell their story and to feel comfortable doing so. So do you have, along with that, do you have any tips to encourage members to share their stories? Any sort of best practices that you would like to share?
Yes, I have a few different ways to encourage entrepreneurs to share their story. And it often happens in the live feed. I tell people that I see it as the bulletin board of our network. So it's a great way to catch up and see who's in here. And essentially, I make sure to remind people about what's in here. And so if I see an entrepreneur introduce themselves, or there's an opportunity like the one on the screen here, I will tag a few entrepreneurs based on what I know about them, their industry, their business stage, and make sure that they see it. And so that extra notification will help, because we are teaching them to come in. We see that on Monday and Wednesday is when we get our biggest members on the network, but I'm reminding them to come back if they're not just in there to see it. So for example, we did an Ask Me Anything campaign this last week, where we featured Matt Allen, who had just recently won an advanced industries grant and has a lot of great lessons to share, and is very easy to talk to. So we created a graphic and introduced him and encouraged entrepreneurs to ask questions. One question came in, and then I tagged more, and you can see that someone I tagged is up there in our recently active users. So that's what I look at to make sure that, the tags are working. And so I also am always looking through the live feed to see what's working. I tag people if they didn't get their question answered. When they do have their question answered, then we're, again, like Margaret said, celebrating that, making sure people know, and saying, this is a connection that happened on our network, and someone just got help. Someone's offering their expertise. These two people just created a business partnership. And I also encourage people to share their failures, because something I say in all my lean coffees is everyone's here to see everyone else succeed. And we talk a lot about failure in entrepreneurship because it's part of the process. So we want to destigmatize that. And so we don't just share the wins. We are often asking people to be vulnerable and saying, this isn't working for me. What do I do? So that they can really tap into the expertise on our network. And so that's helping a lot, especially for early stage entrepreneurs. And I would compare that in any other community to the newest member. So that early stage founder, they're doing it for the first time. Maybe they have a great idea and they're passionate about it, but they haven't thought about all the other things that are necessary for getting into this, which includes knowing how to tell your story. And that's what I'll get into in our last question, is that we do actually teach entrepreneurs how to share their story effectively with our community.
Yeah. And I'll just add too, in terms of getting people to share stories, whenever they're seeing us feature entrepreneurs that encourages them to reach out and say, hey, I've got a great story to tell. So we're starting to see more people pitching their businesses. And of course, I'm getting freelance writers emailing me now and pitching story ideas.
So over the past 2 years, so especially in the beginning, did you see that, because you mentioned now you're seeing more of this. So has it been, again, when we talk about, for instance, like evolution, has it been an evolution, meaning you didn't necessarily see, so much of a kind of a groundswell in the beginning, but as things have moved forward, you've seen more, again, more courage, more authenticity, and more willingness to kind of step up and from your members themselves and share their stories, their businesses, just sort of, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely slow when we first started it. And I think that if we had been impatient, that would have been really discouraging because, we spent months building this network and we just put so much energy and effort into it. And then we opened it up to the public and not a whole lot was happening in there. But because we kept demonstrating how you were meant to use this network, and we hired Vanessa and we really ramped up our storytelling initiatives, that kind of just led to more energy and more energy and more energy. So there's a momentum now.
So would you say being consistent and persistent?
Consistent and persistent. Yeah. And not being afraid to try different things. So we've had numerous different types of engagement activities that we've experimented with for a few months, and some of them work and some of them don't. So it's knowing when to quit and try something new, or when to stick with something and just wait a little bit longer, because eventually people are going to catch on and it's going to work.
Yes. And as a community manager, I'm learning my strategies with how to best nudge members to interact with it the way I hope they will. Sometimes I use Loom videos, just quickly show them how to do something. Sometimes it's that one-to-one. Sometimes it's just an email saying, hey, will you please consider posting this here? And then, of course, I'm keeping track of each week, who posted in the network. Did I nudge them, or did they do it on their own? And I'm learning, who's able to just, if they're taught once, they're able to keep going, and I don't need to nudge them again. But there's an art to nudging, is what I'm learning.
That's your book title.
Exactly. I was going to say that. Maybe that will be your future book, The Art of Nudging.
Instead of The Art of Gathering, The Art of Nudging. Oh dear.
So I actually think that brings me to my next question, which is, between creating content and monitoring your platform, managing a community takes time, right? This is something that doesn't happen overnight. And so in terms of expectations, for anybody who's listening in, do not expect it to happen overnight, because it just doesn't work that way. So how do you allocate your time and resources accordingly? How do you prioritize? Because, this time is precious, and it is a process.
Yeah. How do you do that?
How do you prioritize your time?
Well, they hired me.
Yeah. We realized that we didn't have time, so we hired.
Well, and in terms of allocating your resources, and that includes, so you mentioned you travel around the state. You also have to dedicate time in terms of nudging, the art of nudging. So how do you, sort of allocate resources around this?
Well, for my time, I'd say I spend 25% on travel. Margaret, does that sound right? About 25%?
Yeah, depending on the time of year.
Yes, there are some higher times of year. And then we track a lot of these campaigns and priorities so that I do have structure around what I can get done, because there's no shortage of things to do in our network. And my mind always goes crazy with creativity around who I should be reaching out to and for what. So putting these engagement plans in place and actually targeting them around the data that we have, like, okay, this month we're really focused on engaging this particular region or this industry. that helps me, at least feel like I'm getting somewhere, because a lot of times I am stuck in the weeds, and then I look back to 6 months ago, I'm like, wow, I really have gotten a lot more engagement going, but I was so in the weeds, I don't see it. So having those priorities really clearly stated each quarter, this is how long we're going to test it, and then we'll decide if it was working, and if not, we'll try something else, and to just keep experimenting has been huge.
Yeah, and we do have regular team meetings where we look at all of the different opportunities for us in the coming months, and we have to triage it a little bit, because there's no shortage of what we can do, and there is constant saying, no, this is a great idea, but we're going to push it off for a few more months because it's going to require too much time and keep us from these other different projects that are maybe a little bit more important right now.
Yes.
So it sounds like metrics is an important element in order to be able to assess how you need to move forward. And also, I think importantly, you've pointed out just allocating time towards sort of team strategy, not just blindly, okay, well, let's just try this and this and this, but actually thinking about your strategy over the next, few months or few weeks, and deciding, okay, what should we be prioritizing now as opposed to later, based on what we want to achieve at this particular moment. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'll add too, whenever we launched our network, as you know, there are so many different modules that we could have built out in Hivebrite, but we actually had to cut some after our initial launch and realized we don't have time to really build out projects for people right now. So we're going to cut that and eventually come back to it later. And we're actually at the point now where we're thinking about launching a new module that we've been researching. We've been conducting research on the opportunity for mentorship and how we can effectively do that in our community. But it's a slow process, and we don't jump into any of these different, offerings just willy-nilly, because we want to make sure that we're doing it correctly and strategically and dedicating the appropriate resources to it.
Which sounds very much to me like what a member-centric community is about. Meaning, yes, you might have this function here, you might be able to do this, but it's really about thinking about the member experience, what is going to provide them the best value, and having more isn't necessarily always better, and thinking about the strategy in the long term, meaning this is what we need today, this is what they need today, and this is where we can evolve, but we need to help move them there first. Yeah. So your community is fiercely dedicated to preparing your members for their next level of their careers, which is, especially with a community like yours, that's very much focused on sort of their professional path and where, as entrepreneurs, where they're taking their businesses. Do you have any specific initiatives or programs that you are exceptionally proud of in your community that you would like to discuss?
Yes, I've been waiting for this one. I'm excited to talk about the founder co-opetition. And we saw this as a way to solve for a specific problem in our ecosystem, which is how hard it can be for an early stage founder to get started the first time. So a first time founder needs the most support, and they really need to learn how to engage and interact with all the different players in our ecosystem, like accelerator programs and funders, and how to talk to business support agents and all that. So we also saw the groups module as a really important piece of how our network's going to scale, because right now we're at 1,200 members, but of course we will keep growing. And as the community grows, those smaller areas of community will become more important. But as we launched groups, we realized that people need to be taught how to use it, or they're just not using it. I'm sure other people on the call understand that that particular headache. And so we designed a program around the group function, and we put a cohort of these early stage founders in a group dedicated for them. And we did a 4-week cadence where each week they were achieving tasks through the group live feed. And so every Monday they had to state their weekly goals. Every Wednesday, they had to state their highs and lows for the week. You know, this was what was really great this week. And this almost made me want to quit this week, and creating that vulnerable, safe space. And then, you know, on Friday, posting their, what they actually did that week. And along the way, we had a mentor hour and like a group session where we're really working on this stuff together. But within the group on the platform, we were seeing what we wanted to see all along in groups, which is the engagement of these entrepreneurs to really support each other. So as they posted their weekly goals or their highs and lows, they were getting feedback from other members in the cohort saying, wow, like you're doing great, or, you know, I really relate to that, or have you thought about this as an opportunity? You know, this is just creating a catch-all space for like outside of that group meeting, which was on Tuesdays. They had a space to go back in and share like, oh, I was still thinking about your idea, and I wanted to know if you'd thought about this potential connection or opportunity. And so that's when we saw the groups feature really shine the way we wanted it to. And we incentivized the program with the funds we already had set aside for entrepreneurs on individual scholarships. So they did peer review themselves. It was very peer focused. And along the way, in that 4 weeks, they're learning how to interact with our platform. They are not just engaging in their group, they're seeing everything else that happens in there. I'm connecting with each of them to make sure they see how to use the groups and all the other things on the network. And so through this experience, they now are connected to the rest of the ecosystem. And so the goal of the program is to feed them into that funnel, where they're going into an accelerator or an incubator, or, you know, going after a big round of funding. And we're tracking them, and they're celebrating us along the way, because without us, they wouldn't have gotten connected to these things. So we get to be a part of their story from the beginning, and we get to see it all happen in groups. And that was, we did that twice, and we're really looking forward to bringing it back next year.
That actually sounds really amazing.
It was really amazing. Oh, it was great. And it was just such a safe, vulnerable place. And that's not what the internet usually feels like. So that took a lot of intention around who was leading that program, and the very specific, like setting up from the beginning, we expect you to be posting this many times a week. And then once the program ends, they don't have those requirements. But I'm seeing that our cohort members are the ones that are most active in our live feed. And one of the participants of that program co-hosted a lean coffee with me. So we're seeing them get out in front of people more often, and that we gave them some of that confidence.
Yeah, that's great. Those exactly the kind of engagement we like to see. Yeah, it sounds like essentially almost that you were helping to train them in terms how to interact and how to, as you were saying, develop that confidence that ultimately creates that really dynamic community and creates a richer experience and connection for all. So
networking is vitally important for every industry, and yet we're not taught how to do it in school. And some of us can do the monkey see, monkey do thing, but not everybody can do it that way.
And that's why you see so many who do, you know, sort of dread, they hear like networking and they go, oh, and it's simply because, as you say, it's so important to pretty much any industry, but it's not something that we're taught. And you know, there are those who are naturally comfortable with it, but I think that they're a relatively minority group. And so, yeah, it's great when you can create that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, well, that's our job as event organizers, is to make an environment where people can be successful, to network, and not make it an unpleasant situation for them. Right.
And ultimately, that also helps that cohesion within the community. So it makes it feel more community. So then you get value to belonging, which is exactly the kind of experience you want to create. So, okay, so that was great. Thank you so much for answering my questions. We should probably move on to some questions from the audience. So I'm just going to click here. I have a few here. were the video training tutorials that you were able to, so were you able to leverage some of the trainings and tutorials that were shared by Hivebrite, for instance, with when kind of helping with your community and building your community?
Yes. Yeah, I think especially early on, we really relied on the tutorials that were available to us. And that included everything from just how do you build this out to how do you then start encouraging people to use this environment. So yes, we have used that content quite extensively.
That's good. It's good to know that people are using it. That's also helpful for us. Also, so I have from Elisa. So what kind of customized profile data have you used that you have found helpful, Vanessa?
Yes, so we use industry. So we have about 35 industries represented on our network. We use business stage. It's really important for us when an entrepreneur is entering their profile information. We want to know what stage they're at and what kind of support they need, because it can be very different depending on how far into their startup they are. And we ask them the give and get. What is your expertise? What do you need help with? And we also ask them, why are you here? What brings you to the network? And we don't require hard data around gender or pronouns. You know, we offer that space if they want to give it to us, but we don't require it. We also set it up to give to collect the most vital data as quickly as we can, because we also saw it as, we don't want to create a barrier by creating a really long sign up form, because we're aware that attention spans are shorter these days, and it's more important that they get into our network so that I can then reach out and find out more.
That's a good point.
I'll also just add to that, part of the intentionality with those questions that we're asking when people sign up is, what are you looking to get? And then we have the expertise, what are you offering? And then we're actually making those types of connections for them. So there are different campaigns that Vanessa does in the live feed to try to sync those people who have a question and the people who have an answer. So it's not just for our information on, reporting, it's actually usable metrics for increasing the engagement in the community.
I think that's actually really useful in terms of thinking about how to best use the data that is coming through, and so that they understand that the data is being used to help build up the community and to connect them, not just because you're trying to collect their data. Yeah. So I have a question for Mary. How many people did you invite initially?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really remember. I think we had a list of about 500 total, but we did a series of campaigns to bring them all in. So it wasn't just a blanket marketing campaign. These were people that were either associated with different business support organizations in different rural areas. And so they had targeted campaigns coming from so-and-so at this business support organization, inviting them into the Startup Colorado network. And so we did several of those. And then we had some just kind of general invitation campaigns.
It's like a referral campaign almost.
A little bit, yeah. And that was kind of built around the idea that we would have different business support organizations leading groups in their regions or industries. And so they were inviting people into both their group, but also the network as a whole.
Okay. And I have a question here from Jake, who I think is an interesting question. What would be your advice in moving users from a digital platform which hasn't had the best engagement over to a new digital platform? How would you go about decreasing the risk of losing users in the transition process?
I want to know more about this situation.
I know. I need more.
Are we moving away from Hivebrite or to Hivebrite?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is doing your research, like understanding why they're not using your current platform and really have a clear understanding of what the gaps are. And then solving for those gaps in your new environment that you're inviting them into, and then including that into your campaign, your transition campaign, saying, we know that you can't do this here, but you can do it over here, and we're going to show you how. But yeah, I think it's really about making sure that you're addressing their top concerns and understanding the problem before you just throw a new space at them.
So it sounds like your response is part of it goes back to the research again.
Yeah.
Really researching your audience and understanding their needs before you head into sort of the new digital space.
Yeah, and building that digital space very well in advance before you start inviting them into it, so that there aren't any hitches that are going to decrease that user experience, because it does kind of sound like they're in a little bit of a tenuous place. You want them to have a great experience right off the bat and not be burnt coming from one unfortunate situation into another.
So another question from Jamie. Can you please talk a little about the terms and conditions of the platform? How do you regulate the type of content that is posted by members? What if it's too salesy or has negative language, or the topic is inappropriate?
So our terms and conditions are on our network, like at the bottom, like a little down arrow that you can find at the bottom of the screen. And I will remind people what those are, just in a post on the live feed. We've been lucky in that we've had very minimal abuse of our platform so far, but we have had, just on the rare instances, what you're referring to is someone that seems a little salesy or is here for the wrong reasons, not following those community guidelines. I reach out to them to see if we can connect and I can remind them or have a conversation with them about it. And if they're not responding to that, we kick them out. We take them out of our network. And if they try to get back in, it's a conversation about, well, this is why you were, not, this is what got you out. So if you're coming back in, we need to make sure you're on board with these community guidelines. And I have a lot of coaching around how to not sound salesy. And I'm getting better at giving that to entrepreneurs, because it is a common concern. And that's where I go into the member first. Talk about yourself. Don't talk about what you're selling yet. Get them to just know you. And then once you connect with them, then you can tell them about that. But you got to be person first.
It sounds like this is where, in terms of being really clear on the values of the community and making sure that that is there from day one. So when, if somebody starts to get into that little maybe too salesy space, you're able to kind of push back there, in order to ensure that, you're keeping the sort of the spirit of the community and it doesn't get lost in, yeah.
Yeah, and I let them know I'm taking care of it. If someone brings it to my attention, like, oh, this member kind of gave me something salesy, it bothered me, I say, thank you for bringing this to me. I'll talk with them. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again. And please always come back to me if this does happen again. But it's important that it feels safe. And so we do jump on it as soon as we see it.
But that's the value of having a community manager, is that you have somebody in there who is watching and making sure that everyone has a really good experience and addressing those problems, because you don't get that in, a community without somebody who's actively managing it.
So here's another, and I apologize to those listening, because you have lots of great questions and I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. So if I missed your question, I'm sorry about that. We will, I believe we'll be getting back to you with, answers to these questions through email. So what is, and this, I know that we're getting up on time. So what is your biggest community mistake? And what did you learn from it?
Interesting.
I have so many mistakes.
I think,
yeah.
do you want to talk about groups? I think that's probably the one that we have a good
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
curve on that one.
Yeah, so we can't talk about groups. The groups were set up very intentionally with our community partners, and a lot of those community partners are really busy people who have their own organizations that they're running social media for and doing posts and emails and newsletters, and their commitment, it was a little too much to expect. And so the way we set them up to lead the groups and to be creating content, it was asking a little too much. It was not happening across the board. It was only happening a little bit from one in particular. Group moderator is a superstar and does everything according to the book, but it's a lot to ask from someone who is a community leader. And so what we're learning from that is that that those busy people who already have so much on their plates might not be the best people to be leading these groups. It might be more likely it's an entrepreneur who's really passionate about their industry and sees the value in connecting with all these other entrepreneurs and business support agents. So that's what we're looking ahead to testing next with groups. But that was hard, that we didn't get the just the engagement we hoped for from them. But it was also, we realized we were asking a little too much, because without the follow-up, it wasn't valuable for them. But it's still valuable that they're there, and we're very grateful for their participation. And so it's a delicate relationship that we have to figure out what we're going to do there.
Volunteer management, that is a full-time job within itself.
Right. I think kind of see it as like, well, they've got Vanessa now, they don't need us. She's getting paid to do this. But I can't do 12 groups at the same time. I cannot lead 12 groups at the same time. That's another limitation I ran up against.
Yeah, that's talking about prioritization.
Yeah, exactly.
We had 40 more hours every week. I could do it.
Well, and nor, honestly, in order building this community, really want it to be member driven. Would you? I mean, ultimately, would you want to be the one running the 12 groups? You want them to take a leadership role. So it seems like this is you do want them to be, to take that position within the community, because it helps to create, again, a richer sort of experience and community cohesion. Yeah,
absolutely. We want to spread it out. I don't want anyone to see this community as just me driving it. It is really, I don't know the answers to everything, and we can't be everything to any one member. We want to connect them with the resources that they're looking for, and we want to teach them how to find them on their own and make them feel empowered.
And with that, we have 1 more minute on the clock. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their questions, and my apologies for those whose questions I did not get to. I really appreciate everybody being here today. Thank you, Margaret and Vanessa, once again, for sharing your insights and your expertise with us. It was really enlightening. I know I've learned a lot, so thank you so much. For our audience, we will be sharing this recording by email. So if you have any questions, please hit reply on that email and let us know. A survey link has also been dropped in the chat. We'd really appreciate if you could take a minute to give us your feedback on today's webinar. And just many thanks to everyone, and happy holidays.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. Great to see you, Amber. Bye.
Thank you.